I want you to take a look at this relic I just found next to the IHP with an unknown date. It appears to say something like, can't make out the first 3 digits, then Frost, number 307, Natick, Massachusetts, which would make sense given that we're in Natick. But what was this for exactly? That'll take some more research. I imagine that's a name, but to what would this have belonged? That I'd like to know. Anyway, I love relics with writing, especially when it's legible or partially legible. Alright, so I am recording this a week later, now in Del Park Cemetery, Natick's oldest operating graveyard, and just over a mile from where I found that tag. I've managed to track down the tombstone of Mr. Sylvester H. Frost, the man to whom I am all but certain that relic once belonged. And now I will explain why, based on information I've gathered with the help of Ancestry.com. Mr. Frost was born in 1842 in Framingham to Moses Frost and Abigail Dudley. Shortly thereafter, his family moved to West Natick, where he would remain until the final years of his life, very much a part of the local community. And as you can see here, he fought in the war between the states, with the 13th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, having enlisted at 18 and 9 months on June 29, 1861, just 11 weeks after the opening of hostilities at Fort Sumter. By all available accounts, he participated in every battle in which the 13th was engaged, including Sharpsburg, the single bloodiest day in American history, and was promoted from private to corporal and then to sergeant before mustering out in 1864. Okay, so what on earth is this tag from? Well, in all honesty, I'm still not sure, but here's what I'll say. The sole historical record I could find in which Mr. Frost is listed as S.H. Frost rather than as Sylvester H. Frost here on the stone comes courtesy of a Natick Town document entitled The Enrollment of the Militia in 1861, compiled July 9th, which was 10 days after Mr. Frost's enlistment. It served as a comprehensive list of all males aged 18 to 45 eligible for military service, as required by Massachusetts law, then under pressure from President Lincoln's call for troops to suppress the rebellion. The most curious part is that the list contains exactly 1,035 names, and when ordered alphabetically, Mr. Frost sits just about at number 370. Only I can't prove this because the names aren't perfectly arranged, and I literally can't make out some of the handwriting. But I've tried counting myself, and it would have to be within like a 20-man range. And of course, you never know who was added or removed from this list later on. So maybe this is just a coincidence and a red herring. Or maybe, just maybe, that tag was indeed attached to something issued by the town of Natick to its volunteers. Not a dog tag exactly, which appeared unofficially later in the war and would have been much smaller, but maybe it's part of a chest or footlocker or something like that. We must keep in mind that early in the conflict, the towns themselves had to do much of the work assembling and supplying troops. And given Natick's relatively high level of prosperity, civil organization, and industrial might as a shoemaking capital, it's not out of bounds to suggest that the tag had a local militia origin. Speaking of which, I should add that professionally, besides being a soldier, Mr. Frost was a shoemaker, as was like half the town back then. But he owned his own shop, likely at his home address on Speen Street, and so this could not have been an employee ID number. And if attached to a locker, it wouldn't make sense to have Natick, Mass so clearly defined. So it seems to me that whatever this was attached to was intended to be transported outside the town's borders. Maybe then his 370th pair of shoes? But then wouldn't it have like a proper manufacturer's mark and not look so crude and utilitarian? So, suffice it to say, I am really curious to know what you think about this. Obviously, I have no expertise in these matters, and I am operating under an uncomfortable degree of speculation. But am I at least on track with the military theory? We know from newspaper records that Mr. Frost was a member of the Grand Army of the Republic. So could this have been dropped as part of a later reunion? After all, it was found very near an Indian head penny from 1882, not 1862. But if I at least have the name right, and I'm pretty sure I do, how neat is that? To be able to connect that old chunk of brass buried in the woods to a real person who was standing or sitting or walking or parading through that very spot, and who is now directly under me. And that's just what I love about this hobby. It brings history to life in such an intimate, personal, and tangible way. We're now several generations removed, and Mr. Frost's ancestors may not remember his name, but through that little relic, his person, his service, and his memory are given new life nearly a century after he departed this world. Thank you so much for watching. Here is the stone. It's still in pretty good shape, as you can see. Now, just about 100 years onwards. It has a few lichens, but nothing too destructive. Saturday, July 6th, 1861, in the Natick Observer. Mechanic Rifleman. The greatest, most lasting, and exciting local event of recent occurrence was the recruiting, the preparation, final departure, and farewell of the mechanic riflemen of this place on Saturday morning of last week to report to Major Leonard on Boston Common and then take quarters at Fort Independence for garrison duty and drill. At 9 o'clock, the company made their appearance on the street numbering 80 men and were joined in front of our office by Victor and Union Fire Companies with music, who escorted them through several streets to the depot and through to the fort. After a brilliant parade through the principal streets, the company halted at the depot, where a multitude of friends were gathered to witness their departure. The scene of their departure was very affecting, and many a tear was shed for the brave sons of freedom as they took leave of anxious and affectionate friends. They go off each leaving a large circle of friends and relations in our midst to watch and herald their brave deeds. So great was the enthusiasm to enlist in their ranks that in 24 hours after they received orders to march, the company had doubled in number. In the same train were the Marlborough, Sudbury, and Westborough companies, making 5 in all. They arrived in Boston at about 12 o'clock and marched direct to the Common, and from thence to the fort by steamer. In another column will be found a communication by our friend Geo F. Rockwood, one of their number. Captain Moore paid them a visit on Monday and found them all well and enjoying themselves finely. And what was more, enjoying a good appetite, having had nothing to eat but bread and coffee. He came home and circulated a paper and received about $30, which he invested in eatables and forwarded to them on Tuesday morning. Report saith they now have plenty to eat. Henry Pope, who accidentally slipped his knee pen while scuffing, has been brought home. Below we give the names of the officers and privates, 88 in all, 29 of whom are married and 59 single. There are the officers, then the privates, and on the next page, our friend, Sylvester Frost, age 18, marching off to war. And here is that key document I was referring to, enrollment of the militia for the town of Natick, Anno Domini 1861, roughly in alphabetical order, but then you would expect Frost to be on the second page, and he's not. Instead, he's tacked on at the end, right here. The only place where he's listed as S.H. Frost, with those 2 initials. And right here we can see the whole number of soldiers, 1035, Natick, July 9th, 1861. Here is a document containing information pertaining to Frost's military service. It basically just reiterates what I already stated in the video. As you can see, Sylvester Frost, residence Natick, born September 30th, 1842 in Framingham, son of Moses and Abigail, a shoemaker, promoted corporal, promoted sergeant, was in every battle in which the 13th were engaged. Wow. Not that we necessarily needed it, but here is yet another militia record listing Frost Sylvester H. So there we have it for confirmation. This is the Massachusetts State Census from 1865, right after the war had concluded. And as you can see, Mr. Sylvester Frost is listed right there at age 23, already listed as shoemaker. This isn't exactly relevant to the relic, but it's such an interesting anecdote that I thought I might throw it in. And it is that in 1879, Mr. Frost lost a horse. Last Monday, as Mr. Sylvester Frost at West Natick was loading some shoes into a wagon, the horse, which was a valuable animal belonging to J.P. Messinger, started suddenly and clearing himself from the wagon by running it against a post, dashed toward the Boston and Albany Railroad, which I have luggage tags from, interestingly enough, and was killed by a passing train. And would you believe that wasn't the only horse he lost, because only 3 years later, in 1882, he had to put down his own horse after breaking its leg, as you can see right down here. Sunday afternoon, a valuable horse owned by Sylvester Frost of West Natick broke loose from his fastening to a neighbor's barn while the owner was inside and started for home. While turning a corner, the rope caught around his foot, breaking his leg between the ankle and hoof, and was obliged to be killed. Poor horse and poor Mr. Frost. Here's a map of Natick from 1889, and what do we see? Right there in the middle, S. Frost, Sylvester Frost, and just north of him, M. Frost, referring to Moses, his father. And naturally, that looks like Speen Street. Here's the 1900 census, and as you can see, Mr. Frost is listed right here at 79 Speen Street. He's, of course, the head of the household, and his occupation, shoemaker. Here's a photograph courtesy of the Natick Historical Society of Civil War veterans gathered on the steps of the Albanian Orthodox Church in full uniform of the Grand Army of the Republic. Unfortunately, it is undated, but I think it's pretty safe to assume, based on the age of the veterans, that it's within the first 15 years of the 20th century. And here is my attempt at colorizing the image using one of those photo AI tools. It's far from perfect, but it's still fun to try out. It is very likely that Mr. Frost is shown somewhere in this photograph, but exactly where I cannot say without an individual portrait. But that's about the closest we're ever going to get to seeing his face, besides this next photo that I'd like to show you. And that image, courtesy of the Natick Bulletin, is right here. Not of Sylvester Frost, but of his son, Howard, who died tragically after a roof collapsed in a major fire that struck Natick in 1918. And you can see right down here a card of thanks from Mr. and Mrs. Sylvester H. Frost. Now, maybe with some additional AI tools, we can help determine which veteran in that previous photo most closely resembles Howard L. Frost, assuming the father and son shared a likeness. Here are the two obituaries I could find for Mr. Frost. The first coming courtesy of the Boston Globe, and the second, which goes into a bit more detail, from the local paper, the Natick Bulletin. I'll just read it quickly. Sylvester H. Frost, a veteran of the Civil War and member of the Post 63, I think, Grand Army of the Republic, passed away Monday at the home of his son, Irwin H. Frost, the surviving son. That's not in the text, but I thought I might add that in. At Whitman, which is in Plymouth County, after an illness of several weeks at the age of 86 years. He was a native of Natick, one of the old-time shoemakers who worked in his little shop in West Natick. I think that was Speen Street, where he resided until the death of his wife a few years ago. Funeral services were held Thursday afternoon at Whitman, and the body was brought to Natick for burial at Del Park Cemetery, where the commander of Post 63, there we go, and only a few of the remaining 12 members attended the committal services. So he made it to 86 years, and I imagine would have been one of the last remaining veterans in the area. And there you have it. All that from one little relic buried in the woods of Natick. But seriously, if you have any better ideas as to what this belonged to, please let me know in the comments below. I really look forward to hearing from you. And with that, thanks again for watching.